very careful to not becoming another management, classic. Do we please the management and that is it? What about the conscience? Okay, we talked about the conscience, and Leiboviz's model is very, very clear that it has to be holistic. You cannot remove parts of the model. Okay, employee champion, strategist, but the conscience has to be there, very much there. I think that's what we found. Coming back to why is it different in the Indian IT BPO? We go back to then saying, I remember when we started on the culture book, and my own PhD, my supervisor sitting me down, very, very British, and telling me, you're thinking like an Indian, you're writing like an Indian. I said, yes, I am an Indian, I will think like an Indian. And I began to look at where is the evidence of being Indian. Okay, and that was missing. And our book of culture in Indian organizations, I think is very, very pertinent, very, very, that was the real PR. What are we? What is different in us managing our people than, say, the British model, the American model, the European model, the German model, whatever? How is it different? Is it different at all, first of all? And if it is different, what aspects of it are different? How do we manage our people differently? If we are working, say, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but 25 multinational companies. So really, who leads? What is the value add? What is the influence? If you're working for a German company and you have a major part of its services in India, what is it? Indian management of managing people? I leave aside the legal parts, but really look at the soft parts. Paternalism, for example, the Guru Shishya angle, you have a chapter in the book. Okay, how do we manage our Indian young, what we call in chapter 2, Zippies, Generation Z or Generation Y? Because most of our managers of generation are our age, 45 plus. So really there are a whole host of things really here that we need to first of all identify what is Indian management, what is Indian HR management, what is unique and how different it is. So this book again, and we have 2 other books forthcoming 2016, and a special issue in a journal as well that Ashish and I have done we're calling it Indianness. So what is Indianness? So how do we define ourselves as a race? Okay? You look around the globe and we have CEOs of companies. Is their leadership style any different than Jack Welch? And why? Same question in HR. Are Indian HR directors any different to British or German or American or Chinese? Okay? So we have to first of all define who we are. And I think our forthcoming paper on Indianness, calling it cultural singularities of being Indianness, and we're looking at the Indian IT BPO sector. I think that's going to be a very, very important paper that's going to come. We're very proud, we work very hard on that. So we have identified 10 cultural singularities that we're going to discuss.
All right, thanks. I think I see people almost bridging into what you might take into the presentation, but I have just one question before. What are hunches that you had when you went about researching and writing that come through very clearly in the book, and were they counterintuitive findings? What are they that perhaps you could do your presentations?
I think it will be unfair to say that there's a model out there that applies across the industry. The best way to describe it as it's more like a kaleidoscope. At the moment you turn it, from deeply into services, it's very different. And from services into product environment, it's again very different. So now you see, now you don't kind of feel. So the way we approach collecting, analyzing data, we don't really go with a much preconceived baggage other than a theoretical framework. And we go to hands and analyze things on something. And that's a preliminary guiding framework to start with. But as you explore, it's a novel context, it's growing, it's a phenomenon that hasn't been experienced very broadly in the Indian corporate sector. It's 20, 30 years old, but still, it's a novel way of organizing work, managing people, and the kaleidoscopic metaphor, I think, only works best rather than a model, if you like.
Yes, I mean, it's evolving, and like I say, what are the influences? Is it the traditional Indian way of doing things, of managing? If you look at ITBPO and if you look at the senior people, they came from manufacturing, services, banking, whatever other background, technical backgrounds, and because then they made their careers in HR. I mean, that's been the case. Again, if you look at if you're working for Siemens, you have the German angle to it. If you work for Amazon, you did pick up the Americanized way of managing people. And then again, if you work for Bharti Airtel, is the Indian way of managing people that you picked up? So the industry is still evolving, and we have to set benchmarks of our uniqueness of managing people. Because managing people, in a futuristic way, if we want India to progress and we are going to manage people of the future, we will have to have a certain definite model of best practice. Has that been identified? Okay. Obviously, company culture and so on will come, leadership will come, different styles and so on. But are there certain models that are fixed and unique to a particular industry, to a particular set of organizations that we can say that we are moving on now? So the industry is evolving. Are we keeping in touch? And again, dare to say, as academics like us, are we in touch with the reality? Practices like yours. Okay? Are we lagging behind in our research? Okay? Research is always 2 or 3 years backwards. So if you look at our books today, this was happening 3 years ago, yes. But it took us 6 years to research, and then 2 more years to write, and a year to publish. And we are always lagging behind what's actually happening in the industry, which what comes out.
Okay. Audience that have picked up cues and have questions in their mind, hold your horses, just see the presentation that comes, and you can field your questions. If there are more questions than the mics can handle, then probably you'll have to request people to pass them on to me, and we can filter the questions that come through. But there are some fundamental questions that I'm reserving for now for lack of time. For example, what has happened to the human since the advent of IT at the workplace? And many such things of philosophical nature that actually affect even, let's say, the paradigm of management. And these are things that perhaps occasions like these will get into depth, but these are some issues that perhaps some of you are dealing with on a daily basis. Do not be afraid to pose those questions, because that's what academics are trying to provide perspective.
Yes, we will indeed.
For a presentation.
Okay, I thought it might be in order.
Can you reserve your questions for the end? That's the order of this.
Yeah. So it might be in line to just to give you a gist of what the books are about. Obviously, this is not going to be an attempt to summarize what we've done, but a very, very broad, high-level summary of the key themes. The first one that we have here is related to Chris Rowley in the UK, focusing on the emerging business models in the Indian IT industry. And for those of you who work in the Indian IT industry, we've got someone from Infosys here, and we've got several others, NVIDIA and Accenture, I can see some familiar faces there. So, in the early days, as you can see, it was staff augmentation, body shopping, and then moved to evolve. The industry has evolved through different stages, and the argument that we are making is at different phases of growth, evolution, and change. HR had transformed its practices, it had reinvented, recreated its practices. And the far one on the right that you see is really a humble attempt to capture the current space. For lack of a better word, I've just used ground and cloud, but effectively what we're saying is this disruptive innovation that's going to drive the future growth. And that's the new business model if firms do not embrace on that. So if you can just ask the next slide. I mean, this is something that it's just not me trying to, impose my Ashish-centric view there, but there are other academics like Jagdish Seth and Amit Sharma in the US. They've come up with a similar sort of conclusion as to how the industry has evolved, moved from body shopping to efficiency to an effectiveness orientation. And yet another slide in the other one, please. So effectively, in a very short form, we found that efficiency approaches to HR seem to dominate the IT industry by and large. Firms must be able to, the argument that we're finding is in the new era, if you really want to sustain growth, you should be able to do two things simultaneously. Your ability to exploit your existing skills, knowledge, and strengths, but at the same time be able to explore new ideas and new knowledge, new learning. In HR speak or strategy speak, we have a term called organizational ambidexterity, which is doing both things together. So it's been proven time and again in academic literature that firms who are ambidextrous are generally more successful. So the challenge now lies is how do we identify what are the HR practices that support ambidexterity, and this is an area that I'm working on at the moment. It's in very preliminary stages, but very exciting, and it's an area where you try to catch it, but it moves on. It's very hard to get hold of it and get good data. So I'm also going to be flagging a call for arms to provide support for more research on this very topic. So that would be, I think, some of the themes that we've summarized. And we've also found that different HR practices that have erstwhile not been identified in the literature. And this is where I think the practitioner contributions and the contributions from like yourself, Joseph, and Karthik in the audience, Shrikant, Amit, they have given and enriched a much more nuanced understanding of what is it from their point of view, how do they feel that certain practices lead to more of exploitation of your knowledge base, whilst others move towards exploration. So I think we've tried to get the practitioner voice into the academic debate. Yes. The second book, and I'll invite Vijay to it because he's my co-author there. Although Vijay has also contributed to the early book, one chapter.
Yes, I think we gave the academic perspective of future research directions in that book, along with Professor Badwar, who has done the maximum number of publications on research in India. So my co-author from Aston in Birmingham. But really, it is the previous book was a flavor of practitioners and us academics coming up with the models. Yeah, I think this book again is the first in a series. So Ashish, myself, and three other colleagues from the US and the UK have been commissioned with being editors for five years. And this book is the first in that series. And we talk about the human capital in the IT sector. Again, summarizing, I won't go through a lot, but really summarizing what we discussed previously. We talked about the various theories the various academic theories that are applied to the Indian IT industry. So, for example, is it only about money? It isn't, yeah? We all know gone are the days where organizations undertake work in India only for cost. And one British academic, very old academic, asked me the question. So yeah, it's about cost, isn't it? In a typical British style. I said, no, it isn't. I said, look at my own university, 23,000 students, okay? 6,000 of them studying business, and only 1,500 studying science, technology, getting into IT. I said, that is why you cannot manage the IT in your own country, is why it goes out. Where will it go? To countries that have engineering graduates. And then we come back to our own issue in India, where we see NASCOM says that less than 10% of the engineering graduates 10, 12, 20%, yeah, are actually up to the quality. And all of us know that the education system in India, that is more or less, we would acknowledge that. So really, why is it, how can we continue, how can we sustain this, the models and this way of managing people and continue the business for the large multinationals to continue coming to India? So that's really what we like in the book.
So effectively in this book, we're also talking about two models of practice. One on the drivers of skill formation in the Indian IT industry. And then the second more broad framework that we have provided is, which is just outside, not only focusing on skills, but also the wider gamut of human capital management or HR practices. So there's a model here that talks about the drivers of training, or enterprise training, theory of enterprise training in the IT field. For lack of time, I think I can't go into that, but I'll let you buy and read the book if you can. But then there's another model that we can just have a look, and this is Vijay's baby, if I can use the word. Vijay, if you want to take.
Yes, it's as complicated as the industry itself, I'm there to say, but really it's evolving, and I've tried to capture the various thematic areas, both theoretical, as you can see, strategy, managing people, high performance, HR practices. Really, it's sort of a working model that people, like I say, will build upon as we go along the years. So that really, it's a model where we have tried to capture the important aspects and the different arrows going here and there are the linkages that we talk about in the book. It's in the concluding chapter really, so it brings together a host of our arguments in previous chapters.
And this is the third book again. I guess Vijay will probably want to. Okay. Well, I'll give you a bit of a background on how this happened. What we were finding through our research is culture and the way you have to understand the Indian mindset. I think one of my colleagues mentioned that a lot of employees in the Indian IT industries are hardwired in the services mindset, and that is one of the reasons why we can't get a lot of product generation. I said, look, I really don't think that is entirely the case. Maybe there's an aspect of that present, but then the discussion sort of evolved. I think it's much more than the mindset. It goes back in time. It goes back in how we, as a race, as a work ethic, has evolved in the country. So, are you mentioning culture in other words? So that kick started, and as Vijay mentioned, we're doing a special issue on cultural aspects in Indian organizations with a journal entitled Culture in Organization. And around that time, we put out a call to scholars around the world asking for contributions. So we came across several themes on culture. So right from religious and Hindu mythology and the influences that has on the way we conduct ourselves, to British post-colonial influences, to the modernity. And as you can see here, we just try to summarize the various influences culture has on conducting business in organizations. You want to add something?
Yes, I think this was very, very challenging, but at the end, when it came out as a product, Springer New York was the publisher. We were really very satisfied, and this is the first part. Part 2 comes out 2016, called India, Culture and Transition with Rutledge. That's part 2 of the book, but really this part was looking at different aspects of culture in organizations, but with empirical evidence. So every chapter in the book is based on hard empirical evidence. So and that's the model. As you can see there, what is happening in IT, what is happening in healthcare, how do we manage the ZIPPs, as they call it, Generation Z, and as HR professionals in India, how does religion impact upon? So they look at holidays and say, why do we have X number of holidays? And an MNC will say, in Germany we don't have that many holidays. Why do you need it It's an IT industry. It's hardcore driven. Let's have it. Let's do not have as much holidays. Okay. So we're talking about religion and how religion. Pramila Rao has written that on religion. Is the first chapter in the book. And so we try to encompass a whole host of industries, but also a whole host of challenges that organizations face in India. And again, like I said, it was part one of our attempt to bring together under one book culture in Indian organizations. Part two is going to follow. Ashish.
Yeah. I think there's another aspect that Vijay mentioned earlier about Indianness. So you got another slide on that. Yes, you want to talk about it? So we're going to be presenting this paper. It's being accepted for publication in Culture and Organization. And what we moved away is from the traditional Hofstadian dimensions of culture. And we said, look, we need to understand Indianness as a concept before we even get to the monochrome, singular type approach that Hofstede has adopted. And we came up with a set of 10 cultural singularities. They're mostly descriptive values. And you see, you don't have the time to go through the need on each, but the first 5 typify what describes us as Indian. If you have